If you're planning a trip to the Walt Disney World Resort in 2025, there are a long list of things that you need to keep in mind. And we talk about them here on the channel all the time, but one of the things that I really think needs to be discussed, it's one of the reasons that we're sitting down today, is that visiting Disney in 2025 isn't gonna look like visiting Disney did prior to 2020. Goodness knows there are a lot of ways in which visiting in 2025 may not even look like 2024. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking updates, changes to things like Lightning Lane, but no. I'm talking about the things that can really hit where it hurts. The things that you're probably not thinking about. Goodness knows I'm not talking about them, certainly not as often as I should, and neither are other people who are doing this type of thing either, which is why we're sitting down today. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the Jeep. I'm out and about today, got a few errands to run, and I figured I would enjoy the beautiful weather. Maybe you could sit here and enjoy the weather with me. Right now we're parked at the Loop. This is an area not too far from the Walt Disney World Resort. Depending on your starting point, it's like a 20 to 30 minute trip. You also may have to pay some tolls in order to get here, to the tune of like $3 to $6, depending on whether or not you have Easy Pass or Sun Pass, anything like that. This is a pretty good place to know about, not only because of its proximity to the Walt Disney World Resort, though it is a little bit out of the way, but here you're gonna find things like a JCPenney, there's a Converse outlet, we've got some dining establishments over here, there's a Lowe's, I think, right down the way, as well as a Best Buy, TJ Maxx, GameStop. There's a Fortuna Bakery here as well, which is a place that we love. We haven't checked out this specific location, but we do enjoy what they serve up in their Celebration location, so might be worth stopping in. And of course, there's a lot of other things here that might be useful to some of you who, I don't know, maybe you're road tripping. We do have a Pep Boys down the way and an AutoZone. Like I said, there's a hardware store up that direction. They sell stuff that you might need, especially if you're traveling with a camper or something like that. So it's important to know about this as an option if you happen to be in this local area. But anyway, my focus today is to talk to you a little bit about something that I think you need to know about, specifically if you're planning this trip in 2025. And this conversation comes to us thanks to a comment that I got recently, over the weekend actually, and the brief conversation that happened as a result. So basically I was talking about how I like to bring an electric kettle with me when I'm traveling. It's one of my non-negotiables, one of the little comforts of home that I like to bring when I'm able to. It's not always possible depending on how I'm traveling. And I'd had some people ask me about why I do that, especially when staying at Disney Vacation Club resorts in the past. And I mentioned that in one of our recent stays that we did over at Animal Kingdom Lodge. And this person commented kind of in response to that saying, well, I could just ask, I could just request ceramic dishes so that I could, for example, warm up some water in the microwave in a coffee mug. They went on to say that they've never had a problem doing this in the past, and you know, they can just wash the dishes in the sink because Disney Vacation Club villas, specifically Deluxe Studios, have this sink that's available. They usually give you like a sponge and soap and a dishcloth. And this person's not wrong. You absolutely do have a sink, sponge, dishcloth, all the stuff that you need to kind of hand wash any dishes that you might have. Maybe you've brought them with you. If you're like me, you bring like a travel mug or something pretty much everywhere you go, or a water bottle, and you want to make sure that you can clean that out throughout your trip. But unfortunately, according to member services, this isn't a request that they're capable of fulfilling. And the reasoning for that, according to Disney, or more specifically DVC, is that fulfilling these requests to have like ceramic dishes and actual cutlery in the rooms would make it too difficult for housekeeping to turn over the rooms, and therefore, since there is no dishwasher specifically that's mentioned, it cannot be fulfilled as a request. Now this, no doubt, is not only interesting, but it's a direct contradiction of what this person is likely familiar with, right? I mean, goodness knows it contradicts even some of the experiences that I've had more recently. We stayed in the Tower Studio over at the Riviera some time ago. I can't remember how long ago that was. It had to have been more than a year ago now, or somewhere around a year ago now. And we actually had cutlery and ceramic plates and everything in the room, which I actually commented on because I thought it was interesting that there was no sink. You just had to kind of wash it in the bathroom sink. And I just thought that that was an odd choice. So like, it's not lost on me how it seems like someone like myself saying this is lost touch with the reality of the situation. But this is what the basis of our conversation actually is today. And this is where our conversation gets interesting, because one of the things that, especially someone like myself who has been at Disney quite a bit, stayed at a lot of different resorts at the Walt Disney World Resort, especially Disney Vacation Club Villas, as well as other places in the past year, something that I've noticed is that there is definitely still a shift happening at the Walt Disney World Resort that is even beyond the shift that we had seen and dealt with and adapted to after the parks reopened in 2020. And something that I personally find very interesting is that this isn't something that is necessarily industry-wide. You know, we've stayed at non-Disney properties in the past year, a few times in the past year alone. And it does seem like there's been this shift back to the pre-2020 policies, things like housekeeping daily, things like other services that have returned now that the whole craziness of 2020 has kind of tapered off, you know? But the Walt Disney World Resort specifically, I'm not sure if this is true at other Disney resorts around the country or the world. I'm also not sure if this is true at places like over in Universal, so you can share your experiences in the comments and kind of add to the conversation as well. But Walt Disney World specifically seems to be continuing to shift and adjust and almost ignore what was the status quo, moving away from some of the things that we're familiar with in an attempt to redefine what the Disney experience is, in hopes that we've all forgotten what the Disney experience was, or what experiences staying at hotels in general were, prior, of course, to the changes and the shifts that had been made in 2020. And I want to be very clear, yes, I absolutely know that over time things change and shift, things move away, policies are rewritten, you know, they move away from what we're familiar with. But especially as we move into 2025, I think it's important to note that there hasn't been that shift back to normal, or a new normal even. I know that these are like buzzwords that people are nauseated by at this point, but it doesn't feel, at least with the Walt Disney World Resort, that things have leveled off any. So yes, there was definitely a shift that we experienced in the first few years, and we all kind of adapted to that. But I do think that, especially as things kind of went back to normal, even in some corners of Walt Disney World, like housekeeping happening again, even if it's not on a daily basis, or removing things like park pass reservations for non-annual pass holder guests. I think that there's this notion that now that everything's kind of settling, we're gonna have the ability to enjoy things in the way that we once did, that policies and procedures and the way things are done are going to be similar to the way that they were done in the past. And that's not consistent with the reality that is playing out in real time here at the Walt Disney World Resort. And we don't talk about it enough, quite frankly. We just don't. You know, I think since there are so many other things to talk about, there are so many changes, there's so much news that's kind of right in your face constantly. There's so much of a focus on that, and then the focus on other things like this trickles off. And these are the things that are really important to be aware of, because if you're like this person who left this comment, or like the so many other people who push back all the time, which is totally fine. I want to be very clear. I know that some of you have experiences that are very different than the experience that I'm having, and I'm still going to share my experience, and I encourage you to share yours. But there are times like this that there has been such a shift in the norm, you know, in the way that things are done, that we can't really ignore that. So I want to take the opportunity to talk about it whenever we can. There's like a little street sweeper truck. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's very loud. Because they are a reminder for me to say, you know what, hold on a second. I think everyone could use this reminder that things have shifted, things have changed, and if nothing else, I think we need to make sure that, especially when you hear something that contradicts what you know to be true, moving forward into 2025, if you're planning a trip, take a second and consider that it might be. Hold on, if this person is saying that they don't have access to this, why might they be saying that? Should I contact Disney, especially if having this type of thing is important to you for one reason or another? Should I contact Disney and ask about this ahead of time? My answer is yeah, you absolutely should, because you don't want to be caught off guard by this type of thing. And that's also why I think it's so important when you're planning to think about those non-negotiables, to think about those things that are really going to make or break your stay. Because like I said earlier, these are the things that can hit the hardest. I know that it's silly to be like, well, you don't have coffee mugs. Yeah, I understand. It's kind of silly to not have coffee mugs, but especially if you're planning a vacation like so many people do, myself included, and you just want those simple things, those things that are going to, you know, make the experience more enjoyable and relaxing. You don't want to get caught off guard. And right now, especially recently at the Walt Disney World Resort, it's really easy to be caught off guard by such silly things that have a really big impact. So let's just make sure that we're taking that into consideration and remember that, particularly with the Walt Disney World Resort, though I'm sure that this could apply to so many other places as well. I haven't had that experience in the past year, but you know, it's always important to keep that in mind. Things have shifted away from what you might have remembered in past visits, whether it was a couple years ago or, you know, half a decade ago. And it never hurts to ask and find out if everything is still the way you think it will be. And of course, you can ask here. Always feel free to ask your questions, and we not only will share the information that we have, but we often go ahead and research that information and double check that information so that we can share it with you. None of this is just kind of off the top of our heads. We take the time to provide you with the best information possible. But of course, you can always go ahead and contact Disney yourself. A great way to do that, whether it's through DVC or just through the Disney website, is to use their chat function. I know that that's not reasonable for everybody, but it is an available option that won't require you sitting on the phone forever. So maybe give that a shot. Ask your questions, do the research, and make sure that you have all the information that you need so that you can have the best trip possible. But all right, I think that's all for now. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you don't mind that this was just kind of a quick discussion, but I did want to make sure that we're all on the same page, especially as we move forward into 2025. And I hope that you find this information about this area helpful. I know not everyone's going to make their way out here during their next Disney vacation, but it's always good to know what's available nearby. And now you know about the loop. So again, thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Until then, bye.